So this is specifically just a shower pan redo. Apparently they have a leak downstairs that's reared its ugly head. I get called for that quite a bit, and typically the typical call starts out, hey, I have a leak downstairs in my ceiling. We called the plumber cut out a hole in the sheetrock downstairs, looked at the P-trap and realized it was not an issue with the drain, which is never, did I say never? It never is an issue with the drain. I mean, it could be, but that's gonna happen day one, week one. You know, it's not gonna happen years later. So this shower is built, I believe it was about 2 years ago, something like that. And it's not a bad job. It's a brick look type of tile. They did a pretty decent job of getting everything flush in here and flat and straight and all that stuff. I don't know, I'm not really feeling that. 45s are much easier to do, but it is sloped, and so that's a good thing. Bottom one's a little less sloped. A lot of grout in there. Cut could have been a little better, but not really here to critique. The curb is not sloped at all. More than likely there's going to be some wood rot in here. The wood rot has to do usually with the grout lines and because they didn't waterproof anything, so probably a combination of the both. So I anticipate that happening. What I also anticipate is probably some type of wood rot somewhere on the floor area. I'm not really sure yet. Once I get into it, I'll find out. But overall, it's not a bad looking job, and you know, it's difficult to do a shower pan redo, mainly because people don't have a matching tile. I have to go up about 12 inches or so on the wall, and people typically don't have same tile. In this case, I do have it, and it's right over there, so I'm going to be able to make that happen. But we're going to go with a hexagon tile in here. We're going to do the contiguous curb top, which is basically a sill top on top of here to get rid of all this grout line. And then I'm going to have the matching tile to go up. I'm actually going to go up 3 of those tile, which will be about 12 inches more or less, and I'll be able to refashion new drain, new shower pan, all that stuff. Put some wall board in there where I took out all that tile, kind of marry the two together, the existing wall board and all that, and waterproof everything, get it back to where it's functional. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of videos on how to do a shower pan redo, and that's just mainly because I don't have somebody to do all the taping. I don't have memory cards to take up all the time that it would take me to do a fast speed type of video. But I'll do the best I can to go through the different steps. The first step obviously is getting rid of some of this tile, and a Dremel or something to get out this third row of tile is usually the best way to go, but I'm going to do it kind of in a reverse fashion. So I'm going to get rid of all the curb material without bothering the outside tile. Get rid of all of that stuff. I'm going to jackhammer, which I have here. I'm going to jackhammer out all the pan material and get down to a depth where I can actually get in from the bottom of these tile and then just take them out from that point. Not an easy job because, you know, you're focusing on that which is the most work. If I were to say do the rest of this and not do the pan, say at the third tile, and I'm only doing this is probably a 2-day job. Whereas all of this, because of dry time, is about a 5 to 6 day job. So all my work that I do on every shower is usually focused on this, and because of that, it's almost as much work as doing a whole shower. But there's no point in throwing out the baby with the baby water. Don't know where that term came from. It's curious. But yeah, we're not going to do anything with the walls because there's nothing wrong with the shower functionally otherwise. All your functional stuff, when you have a leak, happens from about 8 or 9 inches down. Never anywhere around here. Even the shower valve, I've never had one leak where it caused the problem. But yeah, I'm going to get started. So I'm about maybe 5 minutes in, not even quite 5 minutes. I got off the curb top pieces. I've got off the inside of the curb pieces that were kind of spot bonded on there. Not a big deal, but definitely not the right way to go. Fence that should have been troweled out, and then the tile should have been back buttered, which it wasn't. It was just kind of spot bonded. That didn't cause the leak though. That's just an observation. Another observation, they did the tile first before they put the floor pan in. Again, that didn't cause the leak, but that's kind of back-ass where you don't do that. You know, the floor should have gone up to the edge of the curb, and then everything goes above it. But what we have here is a foam curb. So this will be the first time that I've taken out a foam curb before. It's thrown me just a little bit because this isn't a typical Schluter curb, which is pretty predominant. Usually they're orange, and this is not. So there's some type of waterproofing wrap on top of it, but it started out blue. So yeah, I'll have to look that up, find out who makes this. Because the waterproofing material, as you see, only went about 3/4 into the curb. All wrapped around it. But one of the reasons why I want to do the top even more so now, rather than the outside, is because now that I know it's a foam curb, it's going to be very difficult to get off. These things are glued in, they're glued on the floor, and if they used a lot of caulking to glue this down, it's going to be a little difficult to get up. So yeah, I'm going to start on the floor, get all that stuff up, then I can get underneath there and go from out there. See, I don't want to ruin any of the floor material because that just means extra work for me. Although they did set this tile on top of the floor, I can't really pry it off because I'm digging into this foam. It's not giving me any leverage, so it complicates things just a tad. But again, the curb had really nothing to do with the failure. It's the wave of our future, apparently. Foam shower pan, foam curb. I don't know, you know, there's a certain point where, you know, back in the turn of the century, they were floating everything, and they were full of asbestos because everything had asbestos in it till 1982, and they died early. Then there was a point in the 80s where they were kind of doing things crap. Then going into the 90s and 2000s, this stuff came along. But yet, the alternative way of doing things was pouring a pan with a pan liner wrapped around, and now going forward, red guarding everything. People are focused on foam and plastic in their showers now, and it's somehow a guarantee that things won't leak. Even the way they did this wrap that I mentioned earlier is actually wrapped and folded down in the corner, probably 3 inches out around the perimeter, with the foam pan below it. And then below that is Durarock. And the Durarock most likely is glued to the subfloor, so that's going to be a pain in the ass to get out. This is a pain in the ass, right? All this material. Normally I have all this taken out probably within the course of about an hour. You know, taking out the curb material, the wood, you know, all of this I jackhammered out. Get one of these if you're going to be doing this any length of time. It's much easier to buy one, cheaper. Jackhammering this out is impossible because I'm hitting foam right past the rock. So I'm kind of stuck, like spending probably a couple of hours tearing all this stuff out that was all glued and foam, and I don't know. It didn't help. They still have a leak. Somehow or another they still have a leak. So as much money as they spent in time and effort, actually that's kind of an oxymoron. This is supposed to save you time and effort, but in the end it doesn't save me. In fact, it wastes more time, especially if you're going to have a leak anyway. This served no purpose. The way I do showers will never leak. Yes, it's a little bit more work. Yes, a little more dry time and all that stuff, but I'm never going to go back on one of my jobs. So I'm into this now a couple of good 2 or 3 hours, just taking all this crap plastic and foam out of here. So I guess I've made my opinion on this stuff pretty clear, huh? POS. And then I still have the 4-pan. Although they put Durock under it. Made it a little easier, but honestly, just lunacy. I have no use for this at all whatsoever. Well, it's very possible that I found the source of the leak. These systems that Gertie Schluter and Wheatie and some other manufacturers make up along the way are always suspect, which is why I don't like them. You see these rust stains? They're in direct correlation to these screws. And there seems to be 6 of them here, and all of the heads are rusted out. So when I pulled this up, even though this drain flange cap was screwed in, obviously threads there, I was able to get my little pry bar, pop it right up. So it got right by the threads, although there's not opposing threads on the inside, which is weird. How do you have threads on the outside, but no opposing threads on the inside? I don't know. There's always a possibility of operator malfunction. You know, that does happen. That does occur. There's some wetness here. One of the main reasons that I don't like the new systems specifically is because people like to read directions on things. And when they read directions, that's usually the point of failure because common sense doesn't kick in. Look at these rust stains. Everything that these systems rely on is thin set. And thin set is porous. And so, in theory, this thin set is unmodified. Because when you have a plastic material hitting a plastic material, it's supposed to be able to dry without air. That's what unmodified thin set does. But it's still porous. It still absorbs water. And so that's the Achilles heel of all these systems. Regardless of any type of caulking that's used around them. I don't see any caulking here, I just see thin set. And even some of these drains that come with these mesh flaps that go around them, you know, the directions say that you apply thin set, push it down, screed out the excess thin set, and that's your waterproofer. Really? Like, why wouldn't you use caulking? Why wouldn't you use that material and then red guard over it? I would red guard over this entire thing. Despite and regardless, it's supposed to be a waterproof system. And yes, as I said, operator malfunction can play into it. But what is a necessity? There's only one. There's not a new mousetrap when it comes to systems. As I already commented before, there's a better mousetrap the way I do it as opposed to the way they did it back at the turn of the century. But I think that's a stopping point. I think until somebody devises something that's monolithic, that doesn't shed water in some form or fashion to where operator malfunction doesn't have to kick in. Because again, he could have done everything by exactly what the directions said. But your Achilles heel is always your porous material. And it's illogical to have a porous material as your waterproofer. It's just, it makes no sense. And so, you know, at some point, look at that. I scabbed in this board. This will be interesting when I get into this. So at some point, you know, you gotta kick in your logic and common sense. And when you have these flaps, you know, don't use thin set the way they tell you. use some silicone and screed out all the excess silicone, and then as a preventer, go ahead and red guard it, or aqua defense, or 8+9, or whatever you want to do, but make sure that you don't have a failure. This guy's been in here less than a year, and I got to tear out, you know, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words for all this crap that doesn't serve a purpose. The only purpose it serves, when I hear people talk about it, it saves me time. You know what? Charge an extra day then. Charge an extra day to do it right. Or 2 extra days if you have to. But do it right. Don't do it with all this beach float cooler, you know, keep your beers cold material. So I finally got all the pan material out. I do not like the way they scab this together. There's nothing, you can't see it, but my finger is right below that crack. There's nothing in there shoring that up. So that's an issue. They just did a really piss poor job cutting. There's no reason for that big square to be there. These are just minor type of things. Again, has nothing to do with the leak, but I thought since I'm here, I'll show you all the little minor stuff. God, they just kind of hacked up this floor in a lot of different places. Anyway, I got the drain off, and the easiest way to do that when you're doing one of these pan fixes, there's looks like a cowboy spur, and that is an inside pipe cutter. So it's 3 inches long. Put it on the end of your drill, and you can go down into the drain, and you can just kind of turn it. It's going to go up to the edge because it has a little wheel, not a wheel, but you know, right there. So it's going to go up to the edge, and you know you got a good cut when you go around. So that's it. There's the drain. So that got free and clear, and then I took out all this material. They tried really, really hard to make this shower waterproof. This is fiber rock. Is really kind of a crap. It's somewhere between, it's not even a cement material, it's somewhere between sheetrock and a cement material, but not quite. I don't really have a need for it. It's, how could I put it? If they had waterproofed correctly, then I don't have a problem using it. I just don't have a need for it because it's just fiber. So if I'm going to do something, I would rather have something a little bit more, I don't know, stronger or whatever, because it just comes off and like a croissant into pieces. But they tried really hard because they have this gray fleece material all the way around. I don't know how far it goes up, but they took a lot of time to thin set it to the wall, kind of, sort of. And I assume it went all the way up. I don't know. I'm not going all the way up. In fact, I'm not even going 3 tile up. I have enough room here, almost a foot. I have about 9 inches, and 9 inches is fine. By code, about where that baseboard is where my final curb is going to be, and then there's 3 inches of room above that, so my liner is going to go by that. And by code, you should be 3 inches minimum of your pan liner above your curb, so that's why I'm stopping at 2 inches. Cutting this out is not the easiest thing. Using a Dremel with different types of blades is what I use, and so again, you have a depth on most of these, and so you just feed it into the depth of the board and you're about good. I mean, even right there, I'm not quite hitting the stud. Oops, sorry. I'm not quite hitting the stud, so I have enough girth on there, which is why it didn't bother me to go around here, because this would be the danger with most homeowners, is hitting one of those pipes that come up in the wall to feed your valve. So a good idea, just for precaution, is to actually shut the water off, but because I know my depth is about that with my tile in the way, and then my wallboard, I'm good with that. So I went ahead and cut around the perimeter, and this is where I'm taking the wallboard off eventually. Screwing the pretty back. So I'm going to take all this wallboard off, and then I can go back and get started with the pan part. That's the demo. So now the slow process begins. 3 hours later. Well, a couple hours later, I have things somewhat back to normal. Well, a lot back to normal. Normal, my type of normal, a normal curb, 3 high. Oh, by the way, when you do curbs, please toenail your curbs. I've gone on many curbs that were rocking back and forth when I do tear outs. So I'm using screws in this case because I don't have my hammer? I don't have my nailer, my pneumatic nailer. So I use 3-inch screws, and they are both sides, and because I have a double curb coming together, toenailed into that so that it becomes one solid piece. It's not going nowhere. I cut out the bad wood around here and put in some scabbing that didn't exist before, so that's nice and secure. Put in my scabbing for my blocking back here. And by the way, another little hint, sometimes I throw these out there because I don't know who's watching and for what reason. So I do little notch outs, and I do that with my chop saw, and the little notch outs will fit around the pipe. If it was any skinnier than this, say the pipe came up to here, then I could use a little piece of plywood, same plywood that I bought for here. I could just fashion in and use that as blocking. And then I usually toenail in nails, but in this case I use screws because, again, I don't have my nailer, and even if I did, I couldn't get in there anyway. So I can toenail in the screws from the front as long as they're flush, they're not sticking out against the pan liner, as you see I did there. So everything is kind of repaired. As I said, I want up 2 tile. Is that right? Yeah, 2 tile. So going up 2 tile, I'm well above my 3 inches above my curb mark with my curb now fashioned. And the next step is to put the pan liner in. So the drain cap, oh yeah, and I refashioned a new drain cap. And that's all secure and ready to go. So the pan is, pan liner as it were, is installed. And as I said, I had more than enough to go up all the way up to the bottom of where the tile's at. So no issues there. But now I'm ready to pour the pan. Gonna get that poured, let that dry up, and tomorrow I'll be back and I'll put in some wallboard Durarock on these sides and wrap the curb with the Durarock, and that will be the prep almost to the tiling part. This is the next day. The pan has been poured, pretty much dry by now, but I always like to have a fan running way over there, circulate some air, and let that run overnight. That'll run for a couple of days before I encapsulate this with RedGuard. I have the wallboard up. The Durarock is attached. It is off the pan so as to not wick water, as well as the inside off the pan as to not wick water. Some people ask me about my folds. A big reason why people put their wallboard into their pan so they can push back that fold, and I do that with little pieces of Durarock. Just shove them down there in the gap, and they get filled in when I butter all this stuff. Which is the same reason I don't mind going into the liner with screws, because this is all going to get buttered. Nothing touches, so it can't wick water, and it can't get in there. Once this is buttered, this will all be RedGuarded, and it's monolithic, and it will never leak. I also run a bead of caulking. Usually I have white caulking, silicone around the drain, the edge, so that I feel that to make. Also, when I butter all this stuff, any discrepancies that I have, low points or whatever, I'm going to screed out some thin set, as well as around the perimeter where the pan liner touches the mortar. I'll screed in some thin set along there too. RedGuard just sticks better to thin set than it does mortar. So the buttering process, literally, it's like buttering a cake. I put on thin set, and not really thick. I'm just troweling it out with like a 6-inch knife on the inside, on the outside, and on the top. And what that does for me is it gets all my backer board all kind of flush and contiguous, and very, very sharp, so that I don't have any issues setting the tile later on. Plus, it hides all the gaps. Well, it fills in all the gaps where the backer board meets, all around everywhere. And it also fills in the screw heads. in the inside as well. And this whole thing will get, and then all these screw heads as well, and then the marrying of the other backer board that's back there where I cut off, and this new backer board, get some thin set on top of there as well. You could do some caulking or whatever, it really doesn't matter. Water's never going to get up there. This is all going to be waterproofed anyway. Red guard will go on tomorrow. It's the next day. All the thin set has dried from the buttering that I did. I knocked off all of that boogering on the sides of the curb and everywhere else with a little 6-inch blade. Just scrape that off. It's much easier to do when it's dry, to get all that off of there, than to keep trying to, it doesn't work too well when it's wet. Anyway, floor pan is all vacuumed out, very important to do before you do the red guard process. My level is too long for this pan, so I can't go straight across, but you can see clearly that the bubble is level from one end to the other. And as we go across, it's still level. And as we go across, it's still level. And as we go across, and that's not an accident. So, trying to get your, this is even worse. Trying to get your, this is a shorter end, obviously. Trying to get your pan, everything has to be, all the prep matters because your tile has to follow. And so that matters a lot. The only difference is that the old foam pan that was here is slightly lower than my new pan. So the 2 tile that I took off to start with will be about 1 3/4 or so. Because 2 tile don't quite fit, especially after the floor tile is on there. But that's not a big deal. Rather have a little bit too much than not enough, because I don't want to do a slither cut. But that's the process. So I'm going to put 2 coats of red guard on that, let it dry until it turns red. It takes about an hour with the fan on it. Second coat on, let that dry about an hour and a half or so. And then I will do the pan proper. All the tile, where's it at? This tile is going back. So I'm going to set that tile today, this afternoon. That will dry overnight, and then tomorrow I will immediately grout that, put a fan on it, and then some cardboard over it so that I can get in these pieces here and start doing the curb and all that stuff. So yeah, just about done after 4, well, we're going into the 5th day now. So yesterday, after I painted 2 layers of red guard on all the surface, including the curb area, I set the floor tile, and I got through grouting it a few minutes ago. So I'm put a fan on it to kind of expedite the drying process before I can kind of step on it. Normally I'd put some cardboard or some scrap sheetrock down or something like that so I don't spill thin set from the walls onto the floor. But in this case I'm only doing 2 rows of tile, so I'm not concerned about spilling thin set, but I am concerned about digging into the grout too much. So that's kind of the process of putting that pan back together. The curb top is in. Floor is grouted, tile has been set, and waiting game now. Just have to wait for everything to dry. Mostly the curb top, because this is pretty heavy. And about an hour of grout to do after this is all dried up, and it'll be done. And like it never happened, basically. It is day 6. Yeah, day 6. And this is this shower pan is finished without touching any of the wall. Everything stayed in place. Everything looks like it never even happened, and that's the whole point of doing a shower pan redo. Much better tile than what was there. Don't like working with it, but a lot of people are doing hexagon tile lately. The contiguous curb top, the full piece, I was able to get in. These are 6 inches. My curb is usually 5.5. I just doubled up and got it, to where it's flush. And did a little 45 cut on the end. And yeah, it's looking good. My customer decided to get one of these Schluter little things for your foot to shave with, which was a good addition since I was doing this stuff anyway. But it is done. It is done like it never even happened. Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're gonna call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.